Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. Well, hey guys, don't forget, you can now watch this podcast on YouTube, which I absolutely love. So don't just listen to us, go over and watch us, especially with my guests who we're going to be talking to today. Now, not only that, I just want to remind you guys to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people, other innovators like you find us. Well, today I am excited because I have one of my favorite guests back to talk to us today. You may recognize him, Sangram Vajre from season 1. He came to talk to us about Belongship, and he's back today to talk to us about his brand new book called Move. I cannot wait for you to hear from him directly. If you'll recall, he is a co-founder, one of the co-founders of Terminus. Since 2014, he goes around and coaches on business, marketing concepts, and he's one of the top 20 voices right now. That's right, top 20 for B2B marketing framework. So you guys, he's an influencer. He's somebody that I want you to lean in. I want you to get notes, get your notes ready, however you take notes, whether digitally or physically. Let's go, because you guys are going to really enjoy listening to him. Don't forget, after this, go check out his podcast, Flip My Funnel. It's one of the top 50 business podcasts that you can listen to. Welcome to our Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Sangram.
Natalie, you talking about somebody else's podcast just shows how courageous you are. And I love that about you. And I'm excited to talk. But you shared a few things. And I know you talked about John Maxwell before, but he shared with me once that, if you want to impress people, talk about all the good things you've done and all the winning stories, and which is what you shared some of it. But if you want to impact people, talk about your failures. So let me just introduce myself in a different way now than what you did to me. Like, I'm a serial DNF student. Really, I remember one time my teacher said, all right, Sangram, I'm going to teach something important. So I want you to walk away out of the class so I can get the kids to focus. So I've been that kind of kid. And then I've been fired twice. Or let go. So it's not like everything that I do or talk about is something that I've gone through all of these things. So now that when you look at it, maybe it looks like, I would work at Pardot and Salesforce and this talks, but I am literally an accidental entrepreneur, accidental podcaster, accidental author, and all those, trying to be an intentional on every one of those areas.
Well, you know what I love about what you just said is one of the things we do on this podcast is we embrace our failures. We embrace the fact that this is a journey and we don't always have it figured out at the onset. So I just love that, because all of our listeners will now resonate with you greatly, because we are all on that same journey. None of us are perfect. We mess up all the time. And that's what makes this journey so fun, is we're human. And so I love that you added that into the mix. Well, I am excited because we are going to talk about this book that I have had a chance to begin reading it. I've also listened to some of your talks on this topic, and I was mind blown. I sat up in my chair, I was taking notes, and I leaned in because not a lot of people are talking about some of the things you're talking about. And so I cannot wait for our listeners to hear this and dig in. Let's start with why the need, right? What made you write this book? What was the burning passion inside of you?
One of the biggest things that I've seen, and people can research and Google this, is called Valley of Death, SaaS Valley of Death, and which talks about the fact that less than 1% of the companies even get a shot to become $1 million company. And then you go further down, when you hit 10 million, you might think, oh, I actually got there now, things are moving. But right from 10 to 50 million, it is called the valleys of death, not just valley, but valleys of death. So almost at 20, at 30, at 40, at 50 companies, it's 0.04% of the companies that go from 10 million to 50 million. So you think about number of companies actually hitting any significant scale continues to diminish as they go from $1 million company to 50. And you think about that, we talked about my experience being at Pardot and Salesforce and now Terminus, starting from zero, we're about 50 million now. And I feel like I've gone through 5 or more valleys of death where we didn't know if you were going to recover. And there was a study that McKinsey did a few years ago that showed that the number one reasons why companies fail is not because their vision all of a sudden gets outdated. It's not because they can't hire smart and amazing people over a period of time. It's not that their product has stopped innovating or new competitors, all those things that people think. It's truly because of the most unsexy part of the business that nobody talks about, which is why you said that you don't hear many people talk about is your go-to-market process. And you have to understand, and in the book, as you have heard and read so far, I personally was encouraged because and also learned that who owns go to market? How do you define go to market? How do you know when you have a go to market problem? What are the transition and transformation stages that you need to be aware of, the telltale signs that tells you that you're going to make it or not? Do you want to be a statistic in 0.4% or actually overcome it? I was blown away with the amount of research and data I was able to gather through it. And talking about COVID real quick, I think there was a time, Natalie, in this 2020, about 2020, 2021, where you could pick up the phone and talk to anyone. And that's really what happened. I picked up the phone and talked to Brian Halligan, who's the CEO of HubSpot, to Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm, Nick Mehta, who started Gainsight, it's $100 million company, and all these CEOs and founders and VCs and CMOs to gather this information. And I love that I ended up becoming a student of go to market as opposed to just preaching go to market.
I love that you did too, because I feel like you're going to help so many of us today. So you kind of posed this question when you were talking, and you said, "Who owns go-to-market?" So I want us to maybe define go-to-market, and then talk about who owns go-to-market.
Well, the book has a much more broader definition that I don't think if people are driving or listening or working out that they would remember. But I'll share what Brian Halligan, since I mentioned his name, how he defined it. That is way more memorable and practical, in a sense, to just think about it every day. He defined, and again, for those who don't know, Brian Halligan has been the CEO from founder CEO, all the way for HubSpot until they became public, and they are a tremendously awesome company. Most startup early stage businesses know or use one of the HubSpot products in their organization. So very well known public company. And I'm talking to Brian, and I say, Brian, so who owns at HubSpot? It's a public company, 100,000, like I think they have 1 million customers or something like that. Who owns it? Who owns these? Who owns go to market? And he said, I own it. And I'm like, wait, Brian, you're the CEO of this company. If you're saying the buck stops at you, I get it. Like that's everything starts and ends with that. But I don't think you own it. He's like, no, Sangram, you don't understand. There are only three things a CEO owns. Number one, a CEO owns a vision for the company. They have to constantly talk about the vision with their team, with their investors, with the customers, with the market, and constantly talk. They have to be the best vision casters and repeaters, because that's what is very important for them to do, for everybody to understand. You can never do enough of it. Number two, you have to build a great culture, because if you don't build great culture, you can't hire great talent, and we all know how that works. No matter how great your product is, if you don't have right people, that's bad. But those are the two most known things. The third thing he said is go to market. And we're like, well, why? And he's like, think about this. And it really made it. And I was surprised, because I had a different thought around it. Even when I started writing this book, I didn't think it would come down to the CEO. That was the most aha moment for me. He said, think about it. Who is making the decisions between hiring another salesperson or creating agency? I will get recommendation as a CEO, but who's going to make that decision? Who's going to make the decision between opening an EMEA, like office in Asia or EMEA, or versus United States? Who's going to make a decision if you want to go in this industry or that industry? Who's going to make a decision? So all these decisions that people don't think are go-to-market decisions are actually go-to-market decisions.
Wow. That's mind-blowing to me. I don't know that I would have thought about the CEO owning go-to-market. So if the CEO owns go-to-market, how then do they look at the go-to-market strategy and really pick apart how the go-to-market is driven?
Yeah, that's where the definition comes in. So Brian defined it as, just look at it as a product, as you're building a product. So go to market is not something that you go offside and with a bunch of your executive team and come up with it. That is vision casting, goal setting, strategy for the company, and all those things. But go to market is this weekly, monthly, quarterly decisions that you're making literally in meetings around, oh, you know what? Let's try that. Let's do that. So there are 4 levers that we talk about in the book. And as some of it came from Brian, some of it came from Jeffrey and others, where it was so important for me to understand it. And it's amazing. If people can take notes, this is the part to take notes on. Is there are 4 areas where you can figure out if your go-to-market is broken, because if you don't fix it, you're not going to be able to transform it. And if you don't transform it, you're going to be one of the statistics. So it's so critical that you lean in on this part of it. The 4 areas are simply this. Imagine you can create a great product, but you can't sell it. So that means your product and your marketing is broken, and your marketing and sales is not very good. So there's a leaky bucket there. So let's say you're able to sell it, but you can't deliver it. That means your sales and customer success is broken. Something is wrong between what the promise is made to the market and what is actually getting delivered, and therefore maybe also the product. If you can deliver but can't renew, that means the customer is now not receiving the ROI. At the end of the year, when you ask them like, hey, do you like the product? They say yes. Will you renew? If they say no, well, that means they're not getting what they were thinking about, or they're not able to show up level. Like, this is why I want this product every day, and I want to renew it for next year. Or if you can renew it but can expand, now that further tells that your product does not have the scalability for you to have a more wallet share of your customers. So those are the 4 leaky buckets that every organization has right now. If you go and look at your organization today, I guarantee you'll find at least 1, if not 2 areas where you say, oh yeah, you might say it differently. I'm just giving vocabulary in many ways, but you might say that, oh, we got a demand problem, or we got a pipeline problem, or we got a expansion problem. But literally what you really need to do is like, what is really the problem? Where are we breaking? And it's between these 4 areas that you start finding out where you need to tweak. Pick one area every quarter if you can. Pick one area and focus on it, fix it, and go to the next one. Like, because you can't solve all of it at one go. So you have to kind of really get into that and say, we're going to pick this first problem or the second problem or the third. But those are the key areas where these companies that cross the 50 million mark do differently than every other company.
Wow. Talk a little bit more about like if your leaky bucket is attrition, right? So you're doing a great job of loading people into the process, but they're kind of falling out the back end, which I feel like that's a very common issue that organizations have. What does that really speak to your go-to-market? Like, what would be an example of what we would be looking to adjust if that's the case?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know if people understand how acute the problem is that you just mentioned. So I'll give you an actual real example that hopefully people say, okay, now I know this is a real problem I need to address. Because a lot of times people get into the hype cycle of net new customer, net new customer, net new customer. Of course, that's important, that's good. But if you don't have your retention right, you're going to actually create a much faster way to go and actually die. As an organization. For example, there was 2 CEOs. One of them had a 50 million revenue. So think, and these are numbers I want people to think about. You know, I know you're writing it down so you can literally see it in your head, because this is important. They have 50 million in revenue, but their net retention rate was 75%. And then there was another company whose revenue was 30 million, and their net retention rate was 120%. So the company that was 50 million versus 30 million, if you just look at that, and if you were looking at, oh, I'm going to just grow, you might say, oh, the valuation of the company that is 50 million should be much higher than the valuation of the 30 million. Well, guess what? The valuation of the $50 million company came out to be 500 million, like $500 million. The value of the $30 million came out to be 1.2 billion.
Wow.
And the difference was literally the fact that the 50 million company had 20 million customers that was not repeatable, not use case driven, very much services added to it, did not have a repeatable flow of it. They had to do more integrations and APIs and things to keep those customers happy, actually costed that money a low retention rate and therefore a lower valuation. So this, if your point is to drive your value of the company higher, There is no better way than making sure you have a higher, over 100% net retention rate in order to make that work.
Well, what I kind of hear you saying too, it's that idea of not how much money you make today, but what if we poured accelerant on it?
Yes.
Which one's going to grow at a faster, more healthy clip than the other? And so that to me is a beautiful example of if we pour accelerant on this, one will deliver, one model will deliver, one model won't. And
Yeah.
so finding this out, kind of understanding this piece is so important. Can you talk a little bit? You talked a little bit in a talk that I listened to about um, crossing from these different sizes of organizations and how that really impacts your business and how some people don't
Yeah.
necessarily make from one size to the next. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Oh, totally. And this is really interesting, Natalie. I don't know if I shared this in the talk, but I'm happy to share this. We wrote the book. The book is called Move, right? The 4-question go-to-market framework. And we had 80% of the book done. And we were like in the last stages of it. And I was, after all these interviews, I went back to these people, right? I went back to Jeffrey Moore and Bryant's of the world and said, hey, based on all these 50 plus interviews that we have done, this is what we're coming down to, which is, the move framework of how do you market, how do you operate, how do you scale, how do you grow, those elements of it. And they're like, well, that's great, but how do you have a conversation with the CEO about this? We're like, what are you talking about? We had a conversation with you and you told us like this is, we're like, yeah, great, but I need to know what stage of the business I am in right now in order to answer these questions correctly. So
Wow.
that pushed us in again, almost a trail to like, okay, how do we up level the conversation? And it was beautiful what happened. I'm so glad we went back to the drawing board on it, and we came down with this 3 piece framework, which is what you're referring to. Companies, when they start, we believe they're in a problem market fit. You're trying to figure out, is the problem real, and is there market enough that will pay to get it? And that might be where some of you might be listening to this, is that, hey, we're just trying to figure out if this works. Is there somebody willing to pay the price? And that's perfectly fine to be in that. That's a problem market fit. And as a matter of fact, our research showed that you could be a $20 million company still in problem market fit.
Wow. That's huge.
That is huge because you haven't figured out the retention angle to it. Once you figure out the retention angle of it and you get over 100% NRR, you will be what we call product market fit. Product market fit meaning you know that you can go in this market at this price point, at this particular ICP, and sell them over and over again and be able to do that effectively. But as with every story, there are new competitors that come in. The customers after a year starts expecting more of you. Your gross margin starts to move. You have now customer success, so you need to make more money on the existing customers. All those things come in, which is forces organization to transform one more time in a big way, which is what we call is a platform market fit. So those are the 3 P's: problem market fit, product market fit, and platform market fit. And platform market fit is when you say, you know what, we no longer are just one product. We have multiple products, which is what makes it platform. But now you can also, for the first time, could sell to multiple personas. So therefore, the market expands for you. As an example, if anybody's a reader of, let's just take again HubSpot as an example. They started with focusing on marketing agencies, and then they got into marketing automation as a product. And then now they have a marketing, sales, customer success, entire suite of products that they sell. That's a B2B example. We can take a B2C example like Morning Brew or Skin. Like all those newsletters that a lot of us read, they all started with, like, the problem was millennials wanted to read news, but they didn't want to read Wall Street Journal news. They wanted to read what normal people read. So that was the problem they were trying to fix, and they did. And they focused on one product for about 3 years. Each one of them about 3 million in 2018, 2019, and they got one newsletter that goes one time a day to their client. And they got like 10 million people signing up for it. And now they are platform market fit because they have multiple newsletters for different verticals like MarTech and entertainment and whatnot. So you have to. The big point here is you cannot skip over the entire journey and become a platform. You have to
Wow.
walk through those stages individually, because if you skip over it, you will miss the transformation that's needed to happen. And that's why companies fall off, because they don't have any net to catch them.
It's so interesting you say you can't skip over being solving a problem, then a product, then platform, because I think all the entrepreneurs are collectively groaning on this on this podcast as they listen, because they came out of the gates trying to call it a platform. And
Yeah.
to your point, they're just trying to solve a problem.
Oh, wow. It's so interesting because, as you said, like I advise a lot of companies and entrepreneurs and invested companies, and they're like, "Hey, we got a platform." I'm like, "No, you got a feature." I'm sorry to break your bubble, but all you have is a feature, not even a product. Forget the product. You have a feature, and that might be a really cool feature, and you have to figure out it's a product-led growth go-to-market process, or do you want to create a category and then get people behind it, or do you want to become a pipe for other companies, like a lot of companies would be, and say, hey, we applied this feature and all of a sudden you are in the market. So there are many ways to go about it, but you're absolutely right. People jump and say we have a platform, and I think they're doing a disservice to themselves.
Wow. That is such a brilliant piece of information that I feel like if folks don't take anything else away from that, getting your book and really leaning into that portion of it to understand that you first start by solving a problem, then your product, then your platform. To me, it's brilliant. It's intuitive. It is what happens, but so often we want to just, hey, we're a platform. No, you're not.
Yeah, and
You're
it's
not.
hard. And I will give it to everybody because I've been in that boat. And part of the genesis of this book, as you know, is like I have gone through this. I've lived this. I'm an operator. I'm not trying to be like, well, let me tell you my 50 years of experience that I did, like 10. No, no, no. I'm living it. I'm still a co-founder of Terminus. We're building company. We're getting to the next hill, and we're learning it. And what's interesting about all of this is I'm hoping that's an encouragement for everybody. The book, as you know, it just hit Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it's doing really well. And every time I get interviewed, I try to make this point very clear to everybody. Hey, look, if you get the book, I want to promise you that this is not a motivational book by any stretch. It is not. It is a transformation book. If you get this book, and if you don't transform your business using some of these concepts, then it's no use, because it's not going to be. It has templates, it has scorecards, it has worksheets, it has, if you go to themovebook.com, you can download all that stuff for different stages of the business, the questions that you need to ask, and it's a journey. It's a journey, but it's a transformation book. So I would love for people to look at this book as like, don't buy this book to get motivated. That's not what this book is going to do it at all. If anything, it may get you into depression, because you will find out all the things that are wrong. But if you really take the lens and put a new lens on it and saying, okay, I now know what stage of the business I'm in. Now I need to ask the question. These are the questions I need to ask to go from problem to product, or product to platform. Here's how I'm going to align my executive team so we can move forward on it. That's my hope, is from this book.
So there's only one other kind of SaaS type book that I just promote, and I've never actually. I would love to talk to this author sometime, but it's called From Impossible to Inevitable, and it talks about how to grow your SaaS platform. And when I started reading this book, what it really did is it made me feel the same level of excitement, which was, this is how to do it. This is your how-to book. So to your point, this is not, hey, we're going to get behind you and rah and motivate you, but we are going to come alongside of you almost like a consultant in a book and help you think about these concepts and things differently so that you can win in the market. And so that's what got me excited about this book. Is it's like a field guide to where you're trying to go. And so to slow down and be able to apply some of these frameworks, principles, there's so many frameworks in this book that are so cool. But to be able to just apply those and think about that holistically. And if you have started a business, you're in a startup, or you're getting ready to do a startup, and if you're in a large organization and you're, a marketer, product person, I mean, this book is, to me, what's going to help you start to have the strategic conversations that you need to have with the executive layer of the organization.
Amen to that. What's interesting, and you probably saw in the back of the book, I was so intentional about who actually gave me the forward for it and who gave the quotes. And if you look at that, it was the CEOs of public companies to CEO of startup to VCs who had 200 plus exits, to profitable exits out of the gates, Kelly Ford, to again, like Jeffrey Moore, who's advising Salesforce, so looking at it. And it's really, I love this, that ultimately, and I shared this with you earlier, is I ended up becoming student of it more so than preaching it. And now I'm sharing what I learned, but I did not walk into it as in some ways I did walk into it, to be perfectly honest, is like, okay, I think I know what go-to-market is. Like, I mean, I've been building companies, I've had products. I mean, I think know. And boy, I was there for a trip. Like, I totally did not understand who owns it. I didn't understand what metrics made sense, what stage of the business. It would have saved me so much heartburn over the years if I would have pulled that together. So I hope this becomes. And the other part, and we can get into the MOVE framework if you want to jump in there, because what was most fascinating and most valuable was the 4 questions of the MOVE framework remains the same, but the answer is different based on the stage of the business, problem, product, platform. So that should hopefully give a lot of people encouragement. You're not coming up with new questions every time. You ask the same questions, but your answers are different.
This is so beautiful. And just to rattle it off real quick, number 1, market. Who should we market to? 2, operations. What do you need to operate efficiently? 3, velocity. When can we scale our business? And then 4, expansion. Where can we grow the most? These 4 questions, that's an all-day offsite with your team on those 4 questions.
Yeah.
Which is so beautiful. What final thoughts, either about the book or anything else we've talked about today, do you want to just leave us with to think about?
So one big idea here is, it's totally okay to not have all the answers, and you will, as you look at the book or even the templates, you'll find out. But what's important to know that it's almost impossible to look at and build a business having built a couple. I have a lot of empathy for building and entrepreneurs who are building business and product and marketing leaders who try to do that. But it's impossible to succeed, at least in my opinion, until you figure out what stage of the business you're in. So if nothing else, go and have this conversation with your executive team. Hey team, what do you think, what stage are we in? Do you think we're in a problem market fit, a product market fit, and platform market fit? And what's interesting to me, because I've done now this talk so many times in closed rooms and big VCs and CEOs and founders, and I've always found that the team is never on the same page. The CEO might say, I think we're a platform market fit. And the marketer leading said, no, I think we don't even have good customers that say the same thing that we solve. And the sales leader might say, hey, we're going to win the day. So it's just personality driven, but not actual what's happening. So if you use some of these questions, you will be able to facilitate a great conversation. But I'll encourage everybody to ask that question and see what happens.
That's so good. I absolutely love that. Sangram, help people understand how and where they can follow you, just to kind of continue to get more of this stuff. You have such a vibrant LinkedIn community, but I know there's so many different places they can follow you.
Yeah. Well, all I'll say is that if the idea in the book makes sense, they should just go to themovebook.com. Okay. We literally put it on it. It literally says themovebook.com, just to download all the templates and workbooks and scorecards and everything. We even created an assessment for companies to do it, that they can get an assessment within 10 minutes of where they are and what the stage that they need to start focusing on. So it will give them a customized assessment right out of the book. So if nothing, I love, and because I'm such a big fan of you, if anything hit people and said, oh, that was a big idea, just DM me on LinkedIn, let me know, and let me know where you are, and I'll send you a signed copy of the book.
That is awesome. What a cool opportunity. I hope you guys take him up on that by DMing him and getting involved in his LinkedIn community, which he's such a great user of LinkedIn. I'm trying to learn from Sangram. I'm not as great on LinkedIn as he is, but I'm trying to get there in my life. So.
Yeah. We're all learning.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing with us.
Amen. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site, at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.